Here is tag you're it, so I guess I'm next. And I have to warn you, after lunch, there are quite a few pie charts in this, so you might not feel ready for pie, or maybe it will make you sleepy, I don't know. But this was a presentation given originally at the American Public Gardens Plant Collections Symposium last fall in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I thought it was a very good program because it talked about different labeling techniques, and it had a lot of charts about costs of labels and different suppliers and stuff, and much of that won't be exactly relevant here, but it'll at least give you some ideas about ways to look at labels and potential sources in your own country of origin, because we're represented by the whole of Europe here mostly, so that's great, and Asia. But, well, it's not the whole of Asia, but at least one from Asia, so good. But the presenters were actually both IrisBG users, so I thought that was very nice. They started with a survey sent out in early 2018 to the American Public Gardens Association Plant Nomenclature and Taxonomy section and the Plant Collections section. It's actually called the communities now. They kind of made it sound more inclusive with the community term. But they only asked APGA members for their surveys, and it closed on February 9th. So you're talking a month in the wintertime. Hopefully folks would get a reply in. I think there's a number on here somewhere. This is part of my pie again. But there were, I think, like 29 respondents or something, and I can get over here probably. But it was only 12.5% of APGA's public gardens, so not a really accurate representation, but a lot of good ideas of people that responded. And as you see, most of the responding institutions had high budget levels, so over $10 million US. So it went down, greatly as the average budget size of the gardens in responses. And the responses came from all over, from APGA members in North America and Canada, ranked here by darker colors for more respondents. 79 responses from 36 states. With California, then Pennsylvania, then North Carolina and Ohio, both with 4 responses. I was one from Ohio. The job titles of these respondees were mostly curators, then plant records managers, specialists, whatever title, various supervisors, some directors and CEOs, others, and some by horticulturists and gardeners as well. They were asking about staffing and supplemental help in the labeling process. Most people had no help. You're on your own. The next largest number had volunteers helping them. Many had students that took care of stuff, and very few had both students and volunteers working in the collections to label, as you would expect. There was little correlation between the size of the institution and whether they got additional help or not. Interesting factoid. Staff responsible for labeling plants mostly worked mostly full-time in that had full-time people responsible for labeling plants, and 20% or so, 30% had or 37% had part-time folks, and then I guess not. Sorry, the largest. You get these numbers right. They even confuse me. The majority spent about half time, then about third time, and then full-time labeling. Gardens with more staffing were obviously in the higher budget categories. The time labeling versus budget. Most time was spent by gardens in the $1 to $3 million range at about a 20-hour per week average. They asked about label damage, and they said the most common label damage was by the squirrel. Second largest by people. I'm not sure if the people chew on the labels or just misplace them. Then they had mowers and equipment. We have many labels that just, we have these like metal rods that we drive in the ground to put on the north side of the plant and hang labels from, and they're like a very heavy steel label. And I find them twisted into corkscrews by mowers. So that must make an awful racket when those things get in the mower blades. But then you have large animals. We had a respondent from Alaska saying moose would damage their label. We don't experience that too much in Ohio. Birds, maybe they had the bald eagles. I don't know, but maybe just by droppings on the labels and that sort of thing. Insects, frost heaving, things like that were common. And as I say, they always seem to like the part of the tag that has the accession number on it. Yeah. So, yeah, 41% of all gardens experienced label damage of some sort. I find if tags are mounted loosely and dangling from the plant, because we tag most of our plants with a branch label that hangs from a limb, ideally about 4 feet high, but depending on where the limb is. If they're kind of swinging free like that, there's no way for the squirrel to hold onto the tree and the tag at the same time. Extra for the legs, unless they're hanging by their back feet holding onto the label. But when they're, we occasionally use a label nailed into a tree, or if it's on a post, they can sit right there and gnaw away.
Don't put peanut butter on your
labels. Do not smear peanut butter on your labels. I found that out by mistake. So, and I know the answer to this is yes, but when I was doing this, it's like I bet they have squirrels there too. Yeah, the gray squirrel is big in Europe. I know that, and it's getting all around. So I just sort of took this little graphic and cut out the little label and put it in his paws, make it look like he was gnawing on a label. But it's a funny picture. So you see some damage from squirrels up here at the top left. You see some in Denver. I've seen that here too. People like to tag it with their own little symbols and that kind of thing for some marking of their own excitement. And then this is a mower damage type label, so you find things all chipped up and chopped up. And something else that's funny, this is sort of a side story. We have very helpful visitors oftentimes. We will have a plant removed, and they take the tag out, put it in the back of their little truck golf cart thing that they're using to drive around, and maybe it falls out for some reason and lays on the ground after they've driven across the garden, and a visitor says, "Oh, the label fell off of this tree. Hang it back on the tree." So it's too much help. They talked about additional ways of labeling plants, what to provide in addition to standard labels. Many gardens use interpretive panels. Next largest is some sort of a brochure or literature, plant lists, and audio tours and other, mobile applications being one. So we have, I assume, the Garden Explorer would be considered a mobile application because you can read it on your phone. It's mobile, so it's not an app per se, but that included apps probably that were specifically created for the garden. They talked about corner types. If you don't round your corners, you can end up with severe laceration. This was one of the presenter's legs herself. She has somebody take a picture of it for her. There's a distinction between people that buy their labels or have them made for them. Most of your purchased labels had the corners rounded of the display labels, whereas more often the fabricated labels had square corners if they were made in-house. Accession labels were most often most often rounded if they were fabricated. Because we used to do accession labels on a laser engraver. We would use the black aluminum and just do a big table sheet and then cut them out, and we had one of those little metal corner rounder stamper things you turn around each corner. That took forever to make, so we got one of the embossing machines. I'll have some pictures at the end that show the embossers, but they come pre-rounded, so it makes it easy. Not surprisingly, most of your label materials, display tags, are mostly, if they're purchased, they are aluminum, but then if you, the most that are fabricated are plastic. Because we have a laser engraver that does plastic labels, it's just more easy to, or if you have a rotary engraver, it's easier to make a plastic label than it is an aluminum tag, although we used to make aluminum on that laser back when we did the accession tags that way too. But oops, the accession labels were mostly all aluminum, just like ours are now. Various other odds and ends materials down here, brass, plastic accession labels, I don't know, steel, zinc. Some people store labels for reuse. These are from a few of the gardens in America. They use some old library cabinets in Denver. They take them off the stake, drill the hole out, refile them, and then remount them for use later. Some just leave the tag in place. I've seen them in big garbage cans full of labels and stuff like that, but then finding the one you want out of there might be difficult. It's more common to only bring in annual and perennial labels than woody tree labels. Ours stay out all year, even the perennial labels. Half do not store labels for reuse, so they just use them one and done. Especially for us, because we actually put the accession number on the display label, so it's only meant for one plant. Maintenance is most often done to display labels as needed. Accession tags are most often checked every 2 to 5 years, probably in the inventory process, as it says, and most say the frequency is not adequate. I mean, who here has all their tags checked every year and feels completely happy with them? I think you're right. So you get situations like growing in. That's why I try not to use tree labels, the nailed-in labels, only in emergency situations where everybody asks what that tree is. They are too lazy to look it up on the Garden Explorer, and there's no other way to label it. You put a stake in the ground, it gets hit by mowers. There's no bed around it, something like that. So it's very, very infrequently that this happens. They talked about the display labels. Who uses them? Most people. And the fields that are on labels, most people at least have the scientific and common name evenly. Family is big. Native range, we do all 4 of those. Other was us, plant source collector information. Only if we have like certain rhododendrons or something like that, it might have the name of a hybridizer, something like that, if it's like part of a series or something like that. Other for us includes the accession number, and we often have locational information about where you are in the garden on the tag too, so you help to navigate yourself around. We do have a little image on there, you'll see at the end, it's a tiny Dawes logo, it's kind of cute. This is that same label that I put in the squirrel's mouth. Just cut it down there. But lines on lines of information, most labels have 4 lines. Some have more, some have less. I'd like to know what the 1-line display label is. One scientific name or one common name, I don't know. Fonts, most respondents were unsure of what font it even was, mostly because those respondents were ones that purchased them and they had no idea what font they were being sent. But Arial seems to be the most commonly used known font, and that's what we use, mostly because it's sans serif. There's no feet on it, so it's easier to read. I think it's a bit cleaner looking. That's what I just said. the way the display tags are installed, vast majority are on stakes. Next was my response. The most common is hanging on wire for us. Drilled into woody plants, that would be probably like a tree mounted thing or other, and the other includes some sort of a wooden base, some other way of being attached to woody plants, taped on some sort of plastic on a rock or even on a fence nearby. I'd take offense to that. Accessibility, they figured the most common accessibility issues they were concerned about accessibility issues for the most part. That's why their choices of typeface and font, text length, the capitalization routines, whether they used italics, and the placement were all part of that. And those that didn't have the consideration had machines that they couldn't really adjust how they were made, so they had no way to address the. So we'll take a break for a pretty shot of garden in Indianapolis, Indiana, where people get their display labels, mainly built in-house. Next largest group just purchased the complete product, so they buy them with their hanging technique or installation method already with it. And then the next largest group just buy the label itself and then mount it on their own. The numbers purchased per year, kind of boring graph, but the vast majority in the $3 to $10 million range make and build their own. Not surprising. Different how they're made. The vast majority for display labels use a laser engraver. Next largest is a rotary engraver. You could have various thermal transfer printers. The metal photo technique, where they have a photographic metal that is exposed to light and does the negative, and then some sort of other printer, maybe it be laminated or something like that. And most people seem to be very happy with their thermal transfer printer. Not sure why. Laser engravers, most common brand was the Epilogue, and I'd never heard of that one. We use a gravograph over here. We had a universal laser system years ago. People are quite happy with the universal. Not sure why they're not happy with the gravograph. We're fine with it.
Just a question there. Are these product names, are these very typically American ones, or are people familiar with these in Europe?
Gravograph.
Where you come from?
Yeah, I think they're fairly universal.
Yeah.
Rotaries, I've never heard of most of these, except for a gravograph. They do rotary engravers as well as lasers. But Vision, Xenotech, I know New Hermes makes a variety of products. What those are. If they buy their labels, who do they get them from? There's a company in the U.S., the States, called Lark Label. It's a major source in the States. Apparently, the one person from Cincinnati said metal photo of Cincinnati, Ohio. More detail about accession labels. Most gardens use an accession label that is distinct from their display label, so 2 tags on the tree, and that's how we do it. I'll show you the mounting techniques as I finish up here. Others tend to have an accession label that is the same as their display label, and almost a sixth have no distinct accession label, just a display label. So only 79%, if you add those, use an accession label of some sort, whether it's part of the display or the accession label. I find that sacrilegious myself. Accession label quantities by institution size. Gardens that have more money tend to make more labels. how they obtain them, mostly make and built in-house. Fonts, since most accession tags are made by machines that don't necessarily have a font, you can't italicize them, or so most aren't not accessioned, and the main reason being that you can't do it. What fields are on the accession tag? We have a few more than what are on here. We have the accession number. We have name as received. We don't do the common name on there because it's mostly like a dog tag for internal use. We do the wild collected information, the collection number, and we actually do how the material was received. So if it came from seeds or cuttings or scions, that's on my accession tag, because if I have a plant, the top dies and sprouts are coming out of the ground, I can look at the tag and say that was from cuttings, that's the same plant. But if it's a graft, without seeing the graft union, I don't know if that's the understock or not. So I can look at the tag and see whether I can save that sprout or not. Just walking up, so why wouldn't everybody use the accession number on the accession label? There were people that apparently didn't. How people attach them, mostly on thin wire. Machines used, again, speed it up here a little bit. Different, companies that sell accession tags. Okay, now we're what I do, which I promised to show you. We have a thermal transfer printer, which I discussed about using barcodes. This doesn't make barcodes very well for our nursery plants. I've made them and scanned them, and usually there's missing lines on the output, so works fine for reading the accession tags and stuff. And we use either a stick tag type thing in nursery pots or a wraparound tag on larger plants if I want a temporary tag or something. So that ends up looking like this. So you see I have the scientific name, the accession number, where it was collected, the provenance, how received seeds, and I do a backup accession number, especially for the stick tags, because if they're in a pot like this part is under the soil and it doesn't get worn off as quickly as that part. So I have it printed twice, it's easier to find it. We have the metal tag embosser. This is a Matica made in Italy, a nice a Ferrari of accession tag machines. It's like a science experiment, watching it go inside there, grab the label out of the holder, put it under the wheel here, and then if there's like 3 A's on the tag, it does all 3 A's, and then it goes to the C. If it's doing Acer, there might be 3 C's on there. Once it's done, it puts it on this belt and spits it into the catch bucket. So that's the accession label material we use.
Can I just interject that? That's predominantly used by the army, isn't it?
Yeah, that's like they use these a lot in factories too. If you buy like a car or a tractor, sometimes you'll have like it's like riveted to the engine block or something like that. So that's what a finished product looks like with my fields on it. So I like abbreviate most of the collection locality just down to the major state or county. This is what our CO2 laser engraver looks like. So I use these 2x4 inch, there's your metric conversion. Display labels, they come pre-beveled edges, makes them nice and clean looking. And you take the plastic coating off, and I can make one label, or I can fill the tray full of 24. And if I have 100 labels to make, I can send it 4 print jobs, and it'll make them all. I take the label, I do mostly a hang tag technique where it's on the branch by using a electrical wire that I cut into 18-inch lengths, or I put them on post labels. These are getting difficult because they're all rotting out, and we've used these for like 50 years, and it's hard to find good treated lumber anymore that lasts, or the mowers cream them. And then last technique would be to use a stainless steel nail and spring and mount it on the tree. So I mount the accession tag and the display tag together. So instead of having the label in 2 places on the tree, I do them back to back. So you just have to flip it over, and you can tell which side to read because this is only, the wire just covers it on one side. So I do all this from IrisBG via mail merge. So all these labels come into Word from a report, label report. So there's the nursery tag, there's the accession tag, or the display label tag with a little graphic on there, and the accession tag. And I have I've got the full report. If you really want to see those pie charts at home and read all those details, I'd be worried about you, but you can email me or ask me for a card, and that's the. I know you're all rare and full of questions.
You just said I do. You run the whole Arboretum on your own, or?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you do data matrix codes with the embosser by making dots?
Well, the Matica engraver is one of those that's only supposed to be sent like a notepad text document, but I've got it set up by the proper page size in Word and the correct margins that it's specified in the documentation. I tested it by sending it from Word, and it took it.
Oh, really?
So I can print it directly from Word.
Does it do a single? But I mean the embosser.
No, it does one letter at a time.
But I mean the embosser for data matrix codes, because it should be able to punch one hole for like one part of the code.
The answer is no, I think.
No, by the embosser has each letter. It does one letter at a time. It's not a point.
It's not a point.
Right.
Okay.
Did you compare the difference between the hanging on label on the tree or this drilling? Do you have some findings about that?
Personal find, I've not done a study, but I know if I don't check them, certain trees that grow fast, if I don't check it every other year, it's already wrapped over the label and I have to do surgery to get that nail and spring out of the tree. So slow growing trees, it's better, but I know with the website and everything, if there's, we label probably 98% of all of our plants with the accession tag at least, and I'd say 95% have a display label as well. So I use those almost exclusively, and probably only 5% of them have some sort of a nailed in tree tag on them. So the extra damage and all from that, I just don't want to deal with. Up to somebody else.
Yeah, I was just interested. You were hanging your labels by their corners.
Yeah.
This seemed an odd way to do that.
Well, that was actually an older slide. Now, if you looked at the end where I did the back-to-back accession label, it's in the center end because it matches better with that longer accession tag. That first one I showed you with the corner was when I had the little small laser engraved tag in it to fit better.
Have you? Yeah, sorry. And also, have you tried using screws instead of nails?
I tried using screws, but I think nails work just as easily. It doesn't require, I just carry like a pry bar, and you can just back it out as it goes.
So they're hanging vertically?
Yeah. Or you could just tip it up, but it's so few of them, it makes very little difference, but the information is on there. So. I often find them where they were hanging like this and somebody has just turned it up to read it and left it that way, so it makes no difference, at least to me.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're ready for the conference.